Hello? 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 I can't hear you. Cannot hear you. Hello? Yeah, raise your mic volume. Raise your mic volume all the way. Yeah, you gotta raise it way more, dude. Raise it all the way.
Oh, hello? Hello?
Yeah, it's better.
Oh, okay, sorry.
You want your camera?
Oh, yeah, it's fine.
Okay. Hold on, hold
I,
on. Let me pop this out. Okay. Popping this out. Where is this? Okay, here we go. Hold on. Okay. Um, yeah, we should be good.
Where's- Um,
Okay.
and I mean, I agree to some extent with your assertion that China is in fact socialist. I just think that it's not a sustainable model. And from what I've read and from what I've done my research on, they don't plan on changing it. So my issue is that it's more of a discussion topic to some extent or another. If China does fall, which I do think it will, because of the tendency to fall and made a profit. If you're aware of that, you probably are.
The first thing,
Um,
if that's your, is that your intro or?
yeah, I think so. I think so.
Yeah, well, the first thing I have to ask you is before we get into the falling rate of profit stuff, people have been predicting the collapse of China for many decades now. They've been predicting that there's an discernible signs of a coming economic crisis, but it's never happened. China manages to somehow surprise them in actually being able to be cognizant of the dangers facing its economy. When the economy gets too hot, the government knows how to make it cold. When it gets too cold, the government seems to know how to make it hot. So, how do you distinguish your claim from the myriad of claims about China's impending doom that have plagued Western discourse for the past few decades?
So I would argue specifically that the organic composition of capital, which is obviously the tendency of the falling rate of profit,
Okay.
it is increasing. If I'm not mistaken, it is increasing, and a capital accumulation is growing. And he has, Xi Jinping himself, I believe, has what's it called? Cut back taxes, cut back a little other stuff, which allows capital accumulation to form more, which may, to some extent, problem. But the issue is not that um, they had the neoliberal period where they were able to keep it up for quite a while. If I'm not mistaken, period had a profit rate of a somewhat successful profit rate, about 15 to 20%, I think at most. His profit rate has fallen from 30%
Well, can we
in like
first
I think
explain
the
to the layman
1990s.
this
It's
why the falling rate of profit is here significant?
um okay. So I have a that specific area because I have to get my notes here. I don't have a very good memory. Relocation. So according to Marx's political economy, the basic contradictions of capitalist accumulation are reflected in the tendency for the rate of profit to fall. To quote Marx, it is the law of the capitalist mode of production that its development does in fact involve a relative decline in the relation.
Yeah, don't quote it. Don't quote it. Just simplify. Simplify like why, what it means, and why this leads to crisis.
Okay, let me.
Do you want me to? Because I think I could do it pretty fast.
Yes, yeah. Okay, I am very new to this sort of thing.
Sure. So basically, the idea of the Marxist rate of profit to fall is that Marx if you want to take it in this way, if labor is the source of value, the idea is basically that price more or less catches up to value, and therefore the fresh supply of labor with which to exploit is basically used. Think of it as a natural resource just being used up, basically. And value can no longer is created fresh. It's just recycled. And if it's recycled, there can't be any new profits. If there's a falling rate of profit, you cannot make a return on your initial investments. And this more or less leads to some kind of society-wide crisis. You agree with that?
I would agree. I think I'd agree. I think I'd probably agree. Yes.
Okay, but here's the thing. Are you aware of the countervailing tendencies to the falling rate of profit outlined by Marx?
I am. I think, if I'm not mistaken, you can have government intervention and that sort of thing, as well as having machines replaced. I don't know if it's machines replaced.
More or less,
imperialism is a way to
more or
raise
less
the profit rate, which is what America's done.
Yeah, more or less, revolutions in the forces of production, right, as a countervailing rate of a falling rate of profit, and the reason for that is because
I would say it's
you're kind of cutting out and lagging a little bit. I don't know if your connection's not stable or
it's probably actually I can stop streaming. I'll just record. I'll start recording, and it'll probably be a little bit less laggy. It's taking a few seconds here. Stopping. Hopefully it's good. I think it's good. I'm not sure. Let me see.
Yeah, can you hear me? Thank you, Ava 1106.
Supposed to be good. Oh, yes, I can hear you.
Okay, it should be good now. Your screen isn't freezing anymore.
Okay, dismiss. Okay, fantastic.
Yeah, well, there's revolutions in the forces of production, which create a new threshold of unskilled labor. It displaces the prior form of instantiation of labor and creates a new form of basically fresh supply of labor.
So you're saying that is it that more people are coming in? I'm a little
no. It's that there's new techniques of production. There's basically a revolution in the forces of production.
Yes.
So that
I would agree, but
and that also corresponds to increased proletarianization. So that middle classes or peasants, more of them are drawn into the workforce, basically.
Yes, I would have to. I have three main points that I want to bring up. That China's economy, and this is the kind of the article I read.
Well, no, but before we get into China, we have to discuss the countervailing tendencies, because it's not enough to point out that there is a falling rate. We agree there's a falling rate of profit, and obviously that those dynamics apply not only to China but to all countries in general in the world. So we have to establish that another countervailing tendency for the falling rate of profit is the export of capital. Would you agree with that?
Yes. They have been exporting more capital recently. I didn't research on that. So yes, they have had more investment, but that investment to some extent or another is a lot less stable than their exporting.
Okay. Then we have to arrive at another question, and this is probably the most difficult one. When was Marx's Capital written? What year was it written in?
Oh, I have no idea.
Well, do you know the century it was written in?
The 20th century, yes. I mean,
Uh,
this is a Marxist. This was a Marxist
it's the
article, and
19th,
this
but it's
they
okay.
used
It's
they.
it's the 19th
Oh,
century.
sorry,
Yeah,
sorry, the
yeah,
19th. Yeah,
19th, right?
sorry, my bad.
Okay. It's not. I'm not trying to quiz you. I'm just trying to point something out for the
That's okay.
audience.
That's right.
So maybe 150 years have passed since then, more or less, right?
Hmm.
Why has the falling rate of profit not led to the complete collapse of global and modern capitalism?
I would say that imperialism has had a lot to do with that. I would say that our actions in probably the Middle East have helped us to keep it following. At least America has helped to keep a positive rate of profit, and also China opening up,
But specifically, well, no. But China opened
put
up
up a
in
large
the
laser focus.
China opened up in the 70s, though.
Hmm.
So even by the 70s,
Well,
that's
I would say
100. That's 100 years.
that's true. I mean, it's relatively documented, like that. It is a trend. Maybe it's not.
I
Uh,
agree that it's a trend, but what I contest is that as a trend, it leads to the collapse of economies. And if it does lead to quote unquote collapses of economies, these are not system wide or even politically wide collapses. These are what in Keynesian economics they tried to call boom and bust cycles, right?
well, yes, the boom and bust cycles, but every boom and bust cycle, it gets less and less profit. I can get my notes on this specific
Sure, but
issue, but
why has the
um,
crisis of profitability not hampered the development of the forces of production and the continued vigorous development of
well,
capitalism itself?
I would say that um, I don't necessarily know the answer to that question, but I would
I
say
think I
that
do. I think I
perhaps it
do.
is.
So me, my answer to that question is basically that Marx foresaw the inevitability of socialism, and that more or less countries have all countries, even capitalist countries, have gone in that direction in order to offset the falling rate of profit. A new unprecedented relationship between governments, politics, and the economy has allowed states to find ways to offset the falling rate of profit. And those are just the capitalist nations, by the way. I'm not even getting to China yet. China, which is a country ruled by Marxists. So if they've managed to do it for over a century, the question then shifts to the question of how could a state ruled by a communist party, ruled by people who study Marx all their lives, how could they not be aware of the falling rate of profit and not be aware of the necessary interventions they're going to have to make and have made actually over the past two
I
decades to
I
offset
would
it?
say that you have a valid point there, and I have also had a similar thought. Um, but I think that it may have to do a lot with the political influences, especially in the party. I don't know much about China. I just know that majority of them are less Maoist, and a lot of them are probably more Xi Jinping thought and lead toward those
They
tendencies.
don't. These are not really real distinctions. I mean,
Okay.
Mao was an era of China. If you're referring to the Cultural Revolution eventually came to an end. Even under Mao, I think Mao didn't think it
Well, I
was going to be
mean,
permanent, and
I've said,
yeah.
I've looked at some a article. It was like by the Business Insider, so it might have been the best article, but it talked that in 2036, with what Maoist economics was, it is possible that they would be doing better off than China is now. It's potentially, obviously, it's not a guarantee because you can't
What do you
prove
mean by
that sort of
Maoist
thing. And
economics? Are you referring to the?
um,
You're referring.
I'm not entirely sure. They were very vague when they described it. I can
Okay,
send you the
okay.
article
I
if you
think you're
want, but
basically referring to the Soviet style, the vestiges of the Soviet system that China still
perhaps.
retained before its reform and opening up. Is that what you're referring to?
I believe so. I wouldn't be sure though because they were
Yeah, but
very
the
vague. They weren't
consensus
Marxist.
in China is not that they have moved to an entirely different um, thing. It's more that for the time, that type of economy was necessary to establish China's national and politically sovereign industrial system. After that task was done, reforming up and opening up was made possible. So they're just different stages of Chinese socialism.
Agreed. Agreed.
But
I want to get.
it's kind of unthinkable that the previous stage could have been prolonged to 2036. The stage had exhausted its purpose, and it has exhausted its ability to grow the Chinese economy and develop the forces of production. So I'm not sure how it could have been prolonged.
I'm not that well versed in history, so I wouldn't necessarily be able to dispute that. So I'm not going to really dispute that claim. But I would say that, like the growing class militancy in China, the strikes, the large amount of strikes that have happened, and the increasing, I would say, maybe social contradictions and economic contradictions, all lead to potential crisis, or
You
maybe
think
not,
that
maybe not collapse, but maybe a crisis that may be um, unforeseen. Because I mean, in 2015, I believe the stock market was booming in the urban middle class, urban middle income class. Believed that it would last forever, but uh, potentially forever, but it didn't. It collapsed, and it went back to about the same rate it was before. So, while I think they are planning to some extent or another, they couldn't, even with the knowledge maybe that was going to happen, prevent that. They spent about I think several trillion yuan on trying to fix that, but they couldn't fix the rate of profit at that time, or they couldn't immediately fix it. So the fact that their response time may be potentially delayed may also have something to do with potentially a crisis that is not avoidable and has to have a massive change. My biggest issue is that Xi Jinping has not necessarily said. He said that I think I have a quote from him here. Some quotes from him here. Um, that any word or action that denies, doubts, or waver over the country's basic economic system is not in line with our principles or policies of the party and the country. I just think such an unwavering support of that system without any sort of maybe thought of perhaps a backup system or something of that nature, because I think they could do that very effectively because they already have their productive forces, and perhaps they could centralize their economy very effectively, especially with the works that we've had done.
Okay. Before a few things. We're kind of going really fast in a lot of directions. So the first thing is that the first you mentioned there's a bunch of social contradictions and all this kind of stuff. What is different from the past from 2 decades ago? What's different now? I don't see a difference.
Well, I would say that that the contradiction is it's growing. Sorry. Let me
Okay, but wait.
Well, there's could I see if I can reach some of my notes here? I mean, China's capitalistic development has brought about a fundamental change in China's social structure as the agricultural labor force fell. The non-agricultural labor force expanded to 360 million from 240 million in 2013.
Dude, you're just shouting. You're throwing a lot of information at me.
I'll get. Sorry.
You got to get to the point. You know.
Okay. So, with the decline of the world's surplus labor force, capitalists in the manufacturing industry have been struggling with labor shortages. In recent years, the Chinese working class has waged struggles with growing degrees of militancy to get better wages and to get better stuff, which also decreases the rate of profit. So that also is something that they have to offset, because they can't simply. And with, I don't know if they.
Okay, wait. Just please stop quoting your notes and stop quoting your articles for 1 second, and let's actually get to the meat and potatoes of what you're trying to say. So you just gave me, from what you quoted just now, I'm going to freeze you right now. You just quoted to me that there's a increased shortage of the labor supply within China, and then this is giving leverage for Chinese workers to demand higher wages, and that this is going to be a problem for Chinese profits. Well, we all know that there's a growing Chinese middle class in general. The Chinese people are demanding a better way of life in general. The Communist Party has been very cognizant of this fact and is aware of this fact. I don't see how this is some kind of... See, I think the general trend of what I'm noticing with your analysis and your interpretation of China is that things that would lead to an economic collapse or crisis in the West, you're assuming that it's also going to lead to that in China. But the difference in China is that the party is 2 steps ahead. The party knows about these... what is a apocalypse in the West is a type of cycle in China, if you will. What I mean by that is that China doesn't see the decline in the rate of profit as the end of the world. It sees it as a kind of cycle of its economy, and it has to intervene in a specific way, and it goes up and it goes down, just kind of like the boom and bust cycle that I told you about. So I think in the first place, when you're describing all of these problems, it's almost like you're describing the problem of a wave. A wave goes up, but the wave must also go down. But how do you know the wave doesn't also go up? Again, it's a wave. You see my problem? You are looking at it from a narrow perspective. You're isolating a single moment of a very complex, dynamic, and innovative system, and just assuming that this downward trend, it's some kind of permanent, devastating crisis for China as a whole. What I want to arrive at, what I really need to be convinced of a major impending crisis in China, is beyond a boom and bust, a fundamentally devastating economic crisis, which is not within the party's sphere of intervention to offset or to deal with in the ways that it has been dealing with in the past.
Okay, so I would say that the exports to other countries has been declining. So I mean, they could obviously have more investment.
What year are you? Wait. First of all, a lot of things have happened in the past 2 years. The coronavirus pandemic has happened. There's a lot of political tensions with the United States. Right. China's dealing with this geopolitical issue. Is this a long-term problem that you're describing? The decline of exports? Like, what are you actually describing here?
I'm not,
because as far as I'm concerned, China is the world's foremost pioneer. Its foremost leader of establishing an unprecedented level of newfound global economic interrelatedness and interdependence. China's forming all sorts of new deals. It has its Belt and Road Initiative. Obviously, it's expanding and building infrastructure in countries. China's goal is to develop the forces of production on a global scale. And I don't see how this will not address whatever fears of an economic crisis in China or a general decline in the rate of profit will be. And furthermore, I also have a lot of questions about the significance of the falling rate of profit in relation to modern economies in general. For example, when we have a fiat system, why is the falling rate of profit even relevant in the first place? How is the falling rate of profit destroy economies in today's modern 21st century economies? I don't see how it does. For example, I don't see how profitability is the main index of economic success anymore. Profitability is certainly a good indicator of the success or failure of enterprises, but profitability seems to be like a temporary issue for most. For example, I'll give you an example of this. Is China's infrastructure projects, are those profitable? No, not in the short term. In the long term, they promote the general welfare of the economy in general, but as a capitalist enterprise, they're not profitable at all.
Okay. Let me see here. I figure you have a pretty good response to this. And I haven't really had any talks with any very informed MLs about this, and I was just sort of curious on this issue. But I do think, I mean, if you look at the graphs, and I mean, obviously the graphs aren't everything and that sort of thing, and obviously that sort of thing is can be reversed, but all of the economy, the world rate of profit, broadly speaking, has always been on the decline. And I think that inevitably, what will happen when you get far enough down? What will happen?
Sorry. From what year has it been on the decline? It's not. It's obviously not always been on the decline.
It's not always been on the decline because it has gone up. It's fluctuated. Also, it's a cyclic fluctuation.
Yeah, I need to know the specific the period you're talking about. The specific one you're talking about.
I don't have the article printed out for the world rate of profit, but I do know from 1948 in America to 2015, it's gone down significantly. And during from the, you see what my notes.
But don't you? But wait. Hold on. If you have a graph, hold on 1 second. If you have a graph that's telling you that from 1948 to now, the rate of profit has gone down, and I'm not doubting that this might be true. Shouldn't you then ask yourself, why is that? Does the rate of profit have decisive significance for modern economies? Because we obviously know that from the period of 1948 to now, the American economy has grown significantly. The general wealth of nations, to paraphrase the title of Adam Quote's book, the general wealth of nations has increased. We know that. So if the general wealth of nations has increased, the general prosperity of countries has greatly increased since then, what does that say about the rate of profit's ability to explain what drives modern economies?
I wouldn't say it's a driving force. I would say that the driving force is sort of maybe monitored perhaps by the what's it called? By the tendency of their falling rate of profit to decline. I would say that that decline indicates, at least to me, and I mean maybe to other people, that the inevitable collapse of. I just don't think that capitalism in this stage.
But
Maybe
this, to
China
me, this
economies-
seems like a kind of wishful, kind of theological kind of eschatology. Like, it's been
Also-
150 years, but the final collapse is coming, right? But why should we believe there's going to be a final collapse?
Perhaps we shouldn't, but I would say that being aware of it either way is still a very important thing, as well as China's growing.
But the falling rate of profit
and
has
it's
not
gone.
proven its significance whatsoever from the 20th century onwards. In the 19th century, it had a clear and decisive significance, but I'm just trying to say things have changed. We don't live in the time in which Marx lived. The falling rate of profit does not appear to have very good explanatory value for what. Or Marx was basically trying to describe the dynamics of historical and economic revolutions. Why is it that some modes of production fall into decay and crisis, and other ones inevitably arise out of their shell? How are there revolutions in the forces of production? Right. That's really the main thrust of what Marx is talking about, and the paradigm that you appear to be using does not appear to explain the history of the 20th century and the 21st century.
Interesting. That being said, I haven't gotten to my third point. I'm sure you'll have a response to it as well. And I'm sure, actually, I kind of already have an idea of maybe a response. But China has become more increasingly reliant on non-renewable energy. They've especially, I think in 2021 or 2020, they became the leading importer of oil, which is a problem because obviously there was a lot of mass protests to some extent or another, where there was protests to the government, obviously increase
In China?
the environmental protections. The environmental protections, but those environmental protections obviously are going to have a
Wait! I gotta
profit.
intervene here. Are people protesting because of China's import of oil or whatever, or gas? Or are they protesting because they find the smog and the environmental conditions within which they live to be intolerable? Because those are two entirely different topics.
Well, I think I'm not sure, but I feel like they're related because I feel
They're not. They're not.
Maybe,
I'll tell you the reason. I'll tell you the reason they're not.
Okay.
As long as people don't have to live with smog, I don't think they give a shit about, whether the government's exporting oil. I don't see how.
I think it
Please don't interrupt me. Let me finish this. I don't see how in China there's an environmentalist movement like in America where they just care about the planet, like this religion about the planet. They don't care in China. They care about their immediate surroundings. You know what I mean? They care about whether there's too much pollution that's making life intolerable. Which the Chinese government is aware of that issue, and they have taken significant steps.
I'm where they have the solar farms and what sorts. So
listen. Please don't confuse these two issues. I literally just interrupted you only to make a distinction between these two issues. There's a general ecological crisis of the need to invest in renewable energy. Yes, China's done that. But then there's also the issue of there being too much smog in cities and too much environmental pollution that's making life intolerable. Now, these are interrelated in a way, right? But the source of protests and grievances is not coming from the fact that the Chinese government is importing oil. Yeah, it's not like American protesters going to protest an oil company to save the planet. That's what I'm trying to say. That's all I'm trying to say. If there's protests, I imagine that they're because people are sick of smog and they want the government to address that issue.
I think I would agree, but the relation here to what my point is that growing regulations will also increase the amount of will increase the cost of capital accumulation, or it would decrease the rate of profit. So all of these circumstances work together with the
but this is but listen, this is it's another issue basically you're naming, that how the Chinese government's actions are going to cut into profits in general. But the issue is that the Chinese government doesn't think in terms of short-term profits. It thinks of terms of the long-term welfare of the people in the economy. So in the short term, it'll cut into profits. In the long term, it will lead to a more healthy, not just a healthy economy, but a more healthy overall society, a more healthy overall environment. China's government has proven the best example of this is infrastructure. Doesn't building infrastructure cut into short-term profits? Doesn't a whole bunch of other actions by the Chinese government cut into the short-term profits of these private enterprises? They do, but in the long term, the people and the economy benefit from it. I think you're misinterpreting the tendency for the rate of profit to fall to mean that any actions by a government which lead to which decrease the rate of profit spells economic collapse. That is not. This is an extreme vulgarization of Marxism.
Okay, I guess I would agree. I am not, once again, as familiar perhaps as I should be with this particular issue. I'm relatively new to this.
I think the whole point of Chinese socialism is the way in which it's proved that profitability is not actually the main source of economic welfare and economic prosperity. Now, profitability is a good measure of that, but you can actually sacrifice short-term profitability in the name of the general welfare of the people, and this will allow the economy to flourish. It won't kill the economy. Because remember, Marxism teaches us what? Marxism teaches us that overall, the main source of the wealth of the economy lies in what? It lies in labor, and it lies in the forces of production. It doesn't actually lie in profit. It lies in labor and the forces of production. Now, profit is still a good measurement, but it is not the fundamental driving force of the economy. Actually, Stalin, in his economic problems in the USSR, wrote about already how the Soviet Union still was not completely free from the law of value, and therefore the tendency of rate of profit to fall, but it has already established a form of an economic form, a system that is going beyond the law of value. And we see the same thing in the case of China. The law of value is not the main determining force of the Chinese economy.
Okay, I guess I get that. That makes a lot more. Does make a little more sense. Yeah, I guess if no, it's Okay, well, I guess that makes sense. Yes, I just I don't know. That's to think about, I guess. Huh. Well, I mean, I don't have much more for you. I guess you've sort of answered my questions, and I guess I wanted this to be a lot more of a discussion because I'm not necessarily that educated on these issues. I came to Marxist-Leninism relatively recently. I've watched your stuff, and I kind of became a little bit more Marxist-Leninist oriented. But yeah, I think that's a valid point to make, and I think that maybe yeah. Okay.
Well, you were a great guest. It was a really fruitful for the audience, and don't worry. I'm pretty sure the audience likes you, so they don't hate you.
Fantastic.
And it was a good discussion. It was a good discussion. Yeah.
Fantastic. That's what I came here for. So thank you. It's been a pleasure having.
Yep, been a pleasure. Yeah. Okay. See you later, man. Bye.
See ya.